Welcome to the college. This is our 457th meeting since we started in February 2009. We put a speaker on every week and every subject. This started in Chicago in 1951 for the purpose of solving all the world's problems. They're still working at it. Anyway, the two speakers tonight are both from Chicago, just so you know. Anyway, we put a different speaker on every week, a different subject. We require a speaker to take a position on an issue or express a point of view that be for or against something. We don't care what it is. We give an hour to make a presentation, up to an hour. If they go over an hour, we cut them off. If anybody interrupts the speaker, we might interrupt or list only one full at a time, one of our rules. Then we have questions and answers from the audience, not speeches of the speaker. Then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in this audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at the podium here to respond to the speaker had to say for or against. Incidentally, we have two speakers tonight. So, but before we introduce our speakers, if there's any announcements, now's the time for announcements. Anybody have announcements they want to make? Here it comes.
Yeah, I guess,
Here comes an announcement.
I'm gonna get some napkins. She never said enough napkins.
Philosophers Forum is having our last meeting on the 14th of May for this term, and it's going to be at the El Phoenix on Forest Lane off of Webb Chapel. The El Phoenix on Skillman is closing, so if you go there won't be anything going on. So I just want to let you know, I don't remember exactly what the subject is, but anyway, it'll be an interesting talk. If you show up at like 6 o'clock, 6:30, you'll be able to eat dinner with some other people and have some scintillating conversation before the talk. And it's $5. Anyway.
Any other announcements? Now's the time. Any other announcements? Nobody has any announcements? Anything you want to say? All right.
Hey, I need to ask, is the philosopher group meeting this Tuesday?
No, it's 14th of May is the next one.
Oh,
And
we
what time
understand.
do they meet? What time, sir?
The talk starts at 7:30.
Okay.
Our speaker next week is Robert Montoya. He's going to talk about Texas 2019 session where taxpayers stand so far. It's on your itinerary. I'm not going to read all this. On May 11th, hearing challenges solved with technology or not. Linda, I can't pronounce it. Bodeo, I think it is. Anyway, she's a professor at the University of Texas. She's going to talk about she's going to talk about hearing challenges solved with technology or not. It should be interesting. On May 18th, What Makes Us Human? Dr. John Lee, PhD in anthropology and Mandarin teacher, should be talking about that. May 25th, Does Time Really Exist? Patrick McElroy, experienced industrial arts advocate, he'll be discussing that. On June 1st, on the coming stock market crash, Dr. Ravi Batra, he's a professor at SMU, and he's quite famous anyway, he'll be here talking about that. Should be interesting. On June 8th, on the American Muslim agenda, that's Dr. Mike Gauss, he'll be talking about that, it's on your agenda. June 15th, What Makes You Who You Are? Dr. David Alec, MD, board certified dermatologist. He'll be talking about what makes you who you are. And June 22nd, Have you treated adequately for your brain problems? That's Dr. Daniel Hurley. He'll be our speaker here. You ought to be interested to read this.
That's
anyway.
me. Brain problems, I'm sure.
So we all have brain problems. Anyway, it should be good. But anyway, our speaker tonight, or in fact our speakers tonight, is Doug Brinkley, a Chicago-based author, poet, playwright, and activist, and Peter Perot, an author and teacher in the second line for a presentation related to his hometown, Chicago. They'll discuss how in our media-drenched society it's not enough to politically pontificate any longer. They will argue extensively that unless citizens act urgently and creatively, we will see an end to our cherished and democratic and free society. So without further ado, please give a very, very warm welcome to Doug Brinkley and Peter Perot.
Pete is going to talk briefly about the whole college complex's institution and how much, we're glad to be here from the Chicago chapter. We're going to talk about generally how great it is for free speech and all that.
Well, yeah, we're really happy to see this campus grow and that you could come tonight. How many of you have been to Chicago? It seems like every plane changes there. If you have a conference or relatives, no matter what reason, someone passes through our city. And what's going on in the Dallas community fascinates us to see the growth here, culturally and industrially. I wanted to talk about some of the topics that we've been able to generate in Chicago that are pretty inspiring, unusual. Memoirs of a Wall Street Uber driver was one Saturday night, as you do, Saturday nights. That drew a big crowd. The Consul General of China came to talk about tariff wars. We had someone talk about a year working for the Saudi royal family and what that was like for an American to spend a year in Saudi Arabia. And corporations eroding the human heart, a love story. Don't know how that got put together, but it was a popular one. But some of the talks that I find here are just as inspiring. I'd like to export some of them. What happened to Lieutenant Colombo? Was anyone here for that one? That was something like we've never had at the Chicago College. Impeach your governor. All right, we just put him in jail. We don't impeach. We go right to the jail cell. The 3 R's, killing American schools, and I thought, how is that so? And it was race, religion, and republicanism. The 3 R's. How many were here for that? Must have been more than 3 years ago. One I enjoyed that we've got to bring to our city is math without paper, pencil, and calculator. That was a topic that drew a crowd. And then finally, the nuts and flakes, the history of American cereal. Nuts and flakes. Did you bring that one in, Tom? That was amazing to me. So we've got something to learn from your club, and we've been at it since 1951 and still growing. In a restaurant such as this with good friends like you are and thinking people. Doug's going to talk more specifically about the condition of the presidency and what you can do about it. And I'll let him go on with that, and he's put together a lot of artwork related to this topic in graphics for you. So feel free to enjoy and fire those questions up at the Q&A period. Doug?
Thanks, Pete. It's a great pep talk for keeping these institutions alive, where free speech is important and where citizens get together to discuss topics of the day that are important. And there's nothing more important than keeping our democracy alive and vibrant. And we've seen turbulent times lately because of threats to that. Now, yes, I'm Doug Binkley. I'm also an author. I write under the name of D.H. Robinson. I've written plays and one science fiction book, and in poetry, and I ran a theater for some years in Chicago. Now, I also want to recognize how terrific it is that we had this sister organization here in Dallas. I'm thrilled to be here. I kind of worried for a little while because of the topic that I was going to a red state. But I hope you'll prove me wrong and you'll invite us both and we'll, be able to discuss these things in a completely civilized manner. But I also did cartooning at one stage in my life back in the 70s and 80s, and since liberty is at issue, I once did a cartoon about the Statue of Liberty. This one happens to deal with a time where the sexual revolution and everything was going on. So the statue's holding up a phallic symbol in The Joy of Sex, a book that was popular at that time. But issues come back and forth. I tried to do a comic strip called it Tree Funnies. You know, these were trees or different personalities and stuff. And it was interesting that when I went looking back for the things that I had done, this was something like 1979 or something. We have a tree that's being punished for being guilty of treason. So we'll be talking a little later about treason. So it's kind of funny how these subjects and these themes come back and forth. This, however, more serious note, did a cartoon back in the time of, some of you remember maybe President Ronald Reagan, and he had a Minister of the Interior, or the Secretary of the Interior, James Watt, who was very famous for doing damage to the environment. There was a topic of acid rain at that time. Well, now we have even worse damage to our environment. We have Trump, and he had a Secretary of the Interior, Pruitt, I think it was, or did I mix it up? He might be the EPA administrator, but in any case, the policies of Trump are ruining the environment. He's selling off lands that are publicly owned, and when you do that, I mean, to just let gas companies do fracking on them and things like that, you are giving away the heritage of our children, the next generation. You are getting a one-time thing. We found that, and Pete could probably tell you about that, with parking meters in Chicago, where Mayor Daley sold them off for privatizing. It doesn't work, let me tell you. We can tell you from the experience that this was like, it was like a $10 billion giveaway, because for $1 billion, a one-time thing, our Mayor Richard M. Daley he wanted the Olympics. He thought for a one-time thing, this would be get some money in and maybe be able to get the Olympics. Just a harebrained idea, but he sold off the heritage of the city of Chicago, of being able to make the money off of that asset over time. And it went to a private corporation. Now, is that good for the public? No, of course not. And Trump is doing the same thing. He's ruining our environmental heritage, and he's ruining our national parks. When the shutdown happened, remember that? We had, the parks were just destroyed. Villainous people went into Joshua National Monument, I think it is, and they destroyed the trees because there was nobody to protect them. Garbage and everything. I mean, people were going in and using the toilets. It was an incredible mess because Trump, an erratic president that he is, he wanted the government shutdown. He just didn't look at the consequences. Okay, we're going to move forward a bit. This was a cartoon I wrote. This was in a more civilized time. This was Jimmy Carter, and this is the old politics where, okay, you might have, arrangements between politicians, and he's trying to give some federal goodies away to our former mayor, Jane Byrne, and she's a Southern belle, and she's trying to play coy and all that. So I thought that was rather funny. That's a more civilized time where we had, these were the kind of political things that went on, not the terrible things we have going on now. So this was another cartoon of Ronald Reagan, and deals with another important issue of gun reform, that there wasn't any. And Reagan did something in this cartoon. He mixed up a couple things. He's anti-gun control, and even though he was targeted by someone with a gun, his attitude was that there should be no keeping them away from criminals, same as today. But he's mixing up the assassination of John Lennon, the Beatle, with the name of John Lennon the name Lenin being a communist, which is what they do today. So he was doing that then, calling people on the left communists. So I thought that was interesting. I thought that this would be an interesting illustration. It illustrates the problem we have with money in our society, money in our politics, how the almighty dollar can be like a snake that's biting at our civilization and also causing damage to the environment. That capitalism, when it runs rampant, when it's unbridled, as the saying goes, it's very dangerous to our society. So I'm giving you some of my opinions. I once did some paintings. This was an interesting painting which I found was maybe relevant to today because did this like something like in 1982. It was also the Reagan era, and it's about a clown with orange hair. And what he's done is that he must have somehow got control of the nuclear codes, and he must have pushed the button, or in some way got a missile to blast off. And for some reason, he doesn't care anymore, and he's just said, "Well, I'll just cut off my own head because I know it's the end of civilization. I've just done this because I'm crazy. I'm a crazy clown with orange hair, and I'll just my head's attached to a balloon." So. We have a crazy president with orange hair. It's actually turned more gray now, but at the time he got elected, it was pretty much orange, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm wearing an orange sticker that says to get rid of Trump and Pence, and we'll go into that a little later. But I thought that was interesting that this was a painting I did that relates to perhaps something that maybe one of our worst fears about the current era and what we're going through. Now, this was the theater. This was the theater I ran for a few years. This is just kind of a joking reference to. It was called the Avenue Theater, and after a few years, I thought I should just call it the Albatross Theater. At least that'd be close to the beginning of the alphabet too. Water everywhere, or art, theater everywhere, and nobody wants to take a drink. This was a review of one of my plays, which involved artificial intelligence, which is also something in the news now. It was a play I wrote about, it was a takeoff on Forrest Gump. I called it Forrest Chump. It was about a brilliant guy who, nothing works for him. Forrest Gump did all these things by accident, and they worked out in his favor. He got a medal. He bought Apple Computer. He thought it was a fruit company. He was involved in all these things, and even though he was low IQ, he just got lucky a lot of times. Anyway, my book signing. Hey, author, article about me in my book I wrote, which I'll have some copies here. I always forget to mention it, but if anybody wants to buy a copy later, I got 3 of them to sell. This is me at the Green Mill, where I occasionally do poetry readings. So there you go. I established a few of my credentials. Pete can establish a few of his later if he wants to brag. I'm just trying to you don't get anything if you don't toot your own horn. And here we have a president that acts like he is the greatest person in the world, greatest person. He actually said that to the Prime Minister of Australia, I presume. It was reported. Oh, that was the fake news. So I sometimes try to do a little impression of Trump. We're here to entertain you and not simply give you a dry political talk. Because one of the things we want to do, and this is a talk that's generated from a talk I gave in Chicago, which Pete saw. He saw it on the internet actually, but it is the idea that we don't want our politics to just be so dry that we can't at least laugh about it somewhat. We know we have the entertainers. We have Stephanie Miller, on liberal TV, liberal radio, and we have other people on liberal TV, or I say the liberals on TV, like Stephen Colbert, that do jokes about Trump. Jimmy Fallon. But anyway, so here I am at the Green Mill with a friend of mine, George Flynn, and he had made a CD with one of my songs, one of my poems made into a song on it. No big deal, but that's the CD. Anyway, this is a couple of things about Pete. Pete, you probably want to tell him something about yourself. You're both a historian and an author, and if he didn't bring his book, I brought one of his books about Chicago Italians at work.
Right.
Yeah. Tell them a little more. Tell them a little bit more about yourself.
A little more about that. Doug talks about agitprops, I call them. Agitprops are somewhat aggravating propaganda or props to, instigate political thought. And so I brought this T-shirt based on the book, and we had them made in Chicagoland on Live Italy. And what I do is write about Chicago's 44 neighborhoods or ethnic neighborhoods, and you could spend a lifetime writing them, eating your way through these neighborhoods, given the variety there. So I decided to tackle them one at a time and do a photo history on Chicago's neighborhoods, and also give walking tours. And so far Tom Berry and his wife have given us several tours of their Dallas and things to see and do, and we're grateful for that. Chicago really is, we think, the capital of political protest. And as far back as 1886, something called the Haymarket Riot, or the Rally for the 8-Hour Day movement. 1992, the Pullman Railroad strike, which sparked its way across the nation until it was finally crushed by federal troops. But it was based in Chicago. And political ideas spread through people like Eugene Debs, who ran 5 times for the presidency as a socialist, again, starting his campaign in Chicago. Reminds me a little bit of Bernie Sanders, and I hope the second time is a winner for him to make a run. And of course, the infamous Democratic National Convention that was known as a police riot in 1968. But we go on and on and on until we have the achievement of Barack Obama, a hometown boy, as president. And finally, the foundation of the College of Complexes in 1951, very important to our political history. So we think we are a national force in radical political movement and thinking, and that's just a plug I wanted to give for my city. Yeah, book that I mentioned, I'll just pass it around and you can have a look at it. And pass it to folks at your table. Go ahead, Doug. Thanks for a few minutes.
Thanks, Pete, for adding some history there. So, that's one of the things we're talking about, to keep these things that are going on today in context. So, even though what we're going through is a very serious situation, and
We had a labor movement. I mean, people were killed. There was violence. So far, we've had not too much violence. We had Charlottesville, and we had one woman killed, so that's a very serious thing. Although I've been making some jokes, but we're going to look at the resistance to what is going on, the danger that we're facing in our democracy. We're going to look at some of the arts, how people have expressed themselves. I'm just going to do a short part. I did a larger part in Chicago. That there's a gallery. Peter knows the owners too. I could have you come up and talk a little bit about them. But first of all, though, I had here something. I had in here an homage to you guys, because you do have topics that relate to what I was talking about. And one of them was about why Republicans are determined to rule as a minority. So I stuck this slide in there. It may seem to be a little out of context right now, because we just talked about that. And reform for a real MAGA to make America great again. So we might discuss a little bit about that slogan and why local elections matter. So we'll also discuss about elections and how they really matter and how terrible it was that the last national one went so wrong. All these things relate to what we're going through and how it's important to have a resistance, a strong resistance. And that resistance should not only be political, but it should be in the arts in ways that people can maybe affect them more and make them see the light better through either theater or through something that grabs them visually, or poetry, which I've written some poetry on. I won't bore you with all of it tonight, but some tweaking to songs that I've done. But let's go on and let's discuss the Constitution. Let's discuss the fact that the very beginning is the preamble. It says, "We the people," and that we, although we had founders that were not perfect, none of them were perfect people. Jefferson fathered children through slaves. We had Washington who owned slaves. Most of them did own slaves. We had people that were ahead of their time, though, in a certain sense, because they were for liberty and freedom, and they did give us a government that, although everyone wasn't immediately given the right to vote, it gave us the form, it gave us the ability to move forward, to be progressive in giving people the right to vote. And women got the vote eventually, and freed slaves were supposed to have the vote in 1866 or thereabouts. But they only had it briefly, and then it was taken away by Jim Crow and voter suppression at that time. But they supposedly earned that right in 1964. Was that when the Civil Rights Act is?
Before Lyndon Johnson?
Under Lyndon Johnson, right. And but now it's being taken away by this voter suppression that's been going on. So we the people, and we need people power to go against the oligarchs and the rich that are trying to, and Republicans. I won't mince words. I mean, it's mainly Republicans that are doing this voter suppression that is such a problem. So, okay, we're going back and forth between politics and the arts. We'll mention that the President of the United States has an oath to faithfully execute his office, and meaning that he should execute the laws made by Congress, and he should not violate the laws. So let's keep that in mind. And he's supposed to defend the Constitution of the United States. And that means, including the amendments, and Article 1 of the amendments is, of course, about free speech and freedom of the press. And so when someone goes out deliberately to tell lies, to subvert the free press in whatever way he can, to humiliate them. I mean, he hasn't murdered any reporters, but he has humiliated them. He has called the New York Times and the Washington Post fake news, and he has done everything he can to support an outlet called Fox News that we know just tells lies and just distorts things. So he is, if that's not criminal, that is a big problem to our democracy. And the subject of our talk is how we can avoid having this democracy go down the drain. So let's all keep that in mind, and let's we'll switch again to art gallery I told you about. It's a very small little thing, Uri Eichen Gallery. It's built by created by Chris Uri and Kathy Steichen. Uri Eichen, they used 2 syllables from each, 3 syllables from the, 4 syllables, sorry, from the from their two names, sticking them together. And so there we have an interesting use of words as art, and people expressing their views. And in this art gallery, you often have forums with poetry readings and with discussions and experts and people who've done movies and other forms of art come and talk about these issues. Very funny, I thought, was this thing about aliens welcome. Well, that takes on the it's supposed to be funny. It takes on, however, Trump's refusal that he doesn't want any immigrants basically to his country. Well, if they are very carefully selected, then maybe they came from Norway, maybe they're okay to come in. You know, if you don't know, I will tell you that the immigrant problem that is coming from Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador, mainly those countries, is caused, it goes back to Reagan, the guy who was in a couple of those cartoons I did, and the way that they completely destroyed those countries back in the 80s with the drug war. And Peter, if you want to chime in on this at any time, you don't feel the need to, but it was, when I worked in those days as a political activist, I wasn't as active as I am now, I have to say, but I marched in marches at the time, especially anti-war, when Reagan was threatening the Soviet Union. I worked with an organization called CISPAS, which was a committee in solidarity with the people of El Salvador. And Reagan's policies were responsible for backing authoritarian regimes in those countries. And we're living with what's come down the chute in history from that. And that's why those people, they're in failed states, and they have gangs that threaten them with murder, threaten their children with murder, and they see their only way out is to try to escape by immigration. And they have a right to asylum. It's called international law. So when they come to seek asylum here, it is actually a matter of breaking the law when the president says that, well, you can't do that at ports of entry, so if they try to come over the desert, well, you're not allowed to do that either. And he's not supposed to be allowed to do that. That's flouting both international law and the laws of this country. Anyway, that's the sideline here, but it shows you that artists, here they have the baby Trump, you know, he's sometimes been said that he acts like a petulant child. So this is an artist's interpretation of that. So the artists, in their way, they can visualize and present these topics and maybe have an impression on people. Not everyone goes to this gallery, it's just a small gallery, but artists are doing these kind of things over the whole country. And I think they're making some inroads into people's psyche. The revulsion will not be normalized. And that, of course, is a takeoff on a famous phrase. The revolution will not be televised. Well, it probably will now, but this I think was a very good catchphrase. These phrases and chants and things that activists come up with are very important. This was a kind of a little ready-made sculpture. You know, artists do this. Like here's a hamburger, and a woman. She's being kind of like pulled into like a meat grinder. Done by a friend of mine. Her name is Ayala Leiser, and she ran a gallery herself in Chicago and moved later. But that's the kind of thing. We're back to Yuri Eichen Gallery. These are two snakes of death, and they are part of a street theater thing that David Stocker, an activist, lives in Rockford. And this was brought into the Chicago and also was displayed in Hammond, Indiana. And it just represents, these snakes are kind of like, they're representing the pipeline of death. Like we all know the Keystone Pipeline is a terrible thing that the Indians have been protesting at Standing Rock for the longest time because it is likely to pollute the Missouri River. Trump is just so into the fossil fuels and demanding that we just burn up every bit of fossil fuels that we can, and it is detrimental to our environment and our society. And so that's another thing that we must resist. So when artists portray, death's heads as, maybe coming out of these pipelines, they form a very solid picture that can ring true to people. And these are two effigies of like hanging judges from England, and they could very easily represent Kavanaugh or Gorsuch, although he did them before those guys were selected, I believe. And here we have a picture which another artist has conceived, what I sort of did, looking into the future, a crazy person that could cause a nuclear war. And we all have to be aware of that, but that's a possibility. You know that in the last days of Nixon's presidency, there are stories that people were very worried about him using the nuclear codes and starting some kind of a war, but we're very fortunate that didn't happen. And there's a artist who made a little thing about Trump as a bird, this tweeting. That's okay. So there was another picture. This was a resistance march, and the activists had come up with a line that you're a mean one, Mr. Trump. Oops. Oops. Okay, I made a mistake. All right, I gotta go back here. But this is PowerPoint, and it's sometimes a little screwy to use, but the artist had come up with the idea. I was trying to enlarge the photo, but you're a mean one, Mr. Trump. Your heart's an empty hole. And I swear that I wasn't thinking of this when later on it became a possibility to think of, because of a suggestion by somebody in the group I'm with, that, maybe we could do Christmas carols. Maybe that would inspire people if we had anti-Trump Christmas carols or anti-fascist Christmas carols. Oh, I don't know if I've used the word fascist yet, but I think you're all getting where I'm coming from and where I'm going with this. And so if there are any Trump supporters in the audience, we'll be happy to take questions, me and Pete, afterwards. But one of the things we really need to do is to call people out for what they really are and not mince words about it. And so anyway, I make no bones about it. I did some of these rewriting of Christmas carols. Another friend of mine who was with the group did that too. We performed them at Daley Plaza, not Dealey Plaza. There's something called Daley Plaza in Chicago. And I just was given a tour of Dealey Plaza by my good friend Tom here, and it was just awesome to see all the sights there and the view from the sixth floor and everything. And, you guys ought to have more on that. You had some guy, author of the book that you showed me. It was, that's a whole other thing. It could be a great talk. But here I channeled this this activist, and I wrote the rest of the parody. You're a mean one, Mr. Trump. You really are a jerk. You're as creepy as a cockroach. You're as charming as a snake, Mr. Trump. And you've never done a day of decent work. You're a monster, Mr. Trump. Your heart's an empty pit. Your brain is full of bullshit. You have not an ounce of wit, Mr. Trump. And everyone knows as president you are 39 times unfit. So you probably all know that that's from the Grinch. All right, so now, from the Grinch who stole Christmas. Well, now that's interesting. I didn't even think about it till this moment, but that was written for the 2017 Christmas, and yet we just had Trump steal Christmas from the federal employees in 2018. So we did do that. We did have that parody available for both Christmases, but it was really absolutely on target this last Christmas, because the federal employees did not have Christmas for their families if they didn't have saved money, because they didn't get paychecks. I can't express it any better. Anyway, so here's one I did, which was a takeoff for "Oh Come All You Faithful." So I don't have the greatest voice. I couldn't hire an entertainer to come here for you, so I'm gonna have to do it myself. You can follow along if you can read it.
Oh, come all ye people, all who love their country. Oh, come ye to Washington. Come and impeach him, born the worst of humans. Oh, come, let us impeach him. Oh, come, let us impeach him. Oh, come, let us impeach him. Trump, the would-be king.
King, dictator, just aristocrat, autocrat. I mean, what is he interested in being? The new Hitler? The new Mussolini? He read Mein Kampf, had it by his bedside for years and years. So, what are we dealing with here? But we can make a little light of it, have some fun. And I had hoped that people would be singing those carols even. This doesn't necessarily have to do with Christmas. There's no mention of it in the text here, so this could be sung anytime. And anyone is welcome to it. This is on a website called antifascistchristmascarols.com. Forgot to mention that, because I am not a professional speaker, and I've only done a few of these, but I'm trying to get better. Anti-fascist Christmas carols. Now, we do have a sheet in the back on the table, and it tells you about this. It also tells you about the other website I created. And on those two websites, anything that you want to sing is yours to sing if it is in the service of saving our democracy and fighting Trump, Pence, and the rest of the fascists. Okay, it's just yours to do as you please with it, as long as hopefully you don't disgrace it or you know. Anyone obviously can switch the words around some way to try to humiliate me or something, but you know, well, I guess if you do that, you do it, whatever. So we'll move on. We just mentioned impeachment, and there's something here about impeachment. It's hard for me to read at a certain angle, but at any rate, the Congress is entitled and indeed is asked to do oversight over the other two branches, but mainly the executive, and it has the power to impeach and should execute the power to impeach if the president or any other officer is guilty of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Now, high crimes and misdemeanors, Pete, that's just a phrase they used because it was popular at the time. I don't think they wanted the president to be impeached for jaywalking or something trivial like that. So it probably should just say high crimes. But also bribery, and Trump is guilty of being bribed. I mean, there are people staying at the Trump Hotel, and you know that they chose to stay there because they're trying to influence Trump. T-Mobile, for one corporation. I mean, I didn't bring a giant list. I'm not a researcher of that nature, but you can find these things out if you investigate them and all. The Mar-a-Lago is a place where Trump used to have the membership, quote, membership, $100,000. It's now $200,000 since he was elected president, and people go there for one reason only. They don't think Trump's a great entertainer. They don't think Trump has got anything special to offer except
as president, oh, he could do them a favor, or they could have influence with him by going there. And we could go into that as a whole big thing. We know there's something called the Emoluments Clause. We could discuss that at length. And that's part of the, I didn't bother to get every single clause that was in the Constitution that was relevant to this. And I don't even know how I'm doing with time, but...
You're fine.
Okay, good. But to get to a serious thing we have to discuss, and I hope Pete will come up with me and maybe we can go through some of this stuff together. We know that the Congress has been tasked with a solemn duty, and it is an important duty because the founders knew, and they even wrote about, the fact that they knew there would be a rogue president. They knew that the office was the most powerful one, and it had to have checks and balances on it. And for a president to run over the law like a bulldozer, like this president has done, cannot be accepted. It cannot become something that's normalized. Because every other president will treat that as a precedent. Which you know, that means in law, something that it's occurred before and it's been accepted. Suddenly it's allowed to become part of the norm, and we can't allow that to happen. Now, we can't go into every single detail of every crime that Trump has committed, but since I gave this talk, a version of it, in Chicago, the Mueller report has come out. And I haven't read that much of it. I've gotten it from articles and from the news. But it seems pretty clear that Trump was guilty of possibly 10 or 12 instances of something called obstruction of justice. And does anybody know what one of the articles of impeachment against President Nixon was? And if nobody can tell me,
Obstruction of
there you
justice.
go, okay. We didn't have to call on the president historian here.
He also refused subpoenas.
Right.
from the Congress.
Thank you. It's not even in my list here because of so many of them there are. Dangers to the country, lawlessness, abuse of power, threat to civil rights, attacks on the free press, voter suppression, vote theft, election rigging, gerrymandering, collusion with enemy power, meaning Russia in this case, which could be construed as treason, denial of science, rule by chaos, need to respond to climate crisis, which he's not doing, environmental destruction, I mentioned that before, extreme corruption, intentional increase of income and wealth inequality. We could argue about that. That's somewhat political, I guess, social justice angle. Attack on women's rights, and possible starting of an illegitimate war, well, threats to invade Venezuela, and he's trying to start a war with Iran. That's in the early stages, and maybe some of you won't think that that's a definite danger right now. But as I mentioned earlier, possible starting with thermonuclear war because of just not necessarily anything, but just the demand is crazy. So we had a president that was guilty of some of these things, abuse of power and obstruction of justice, definitely, and refusing to obey subpoenas which are lawful and which Congress is entitled to have access to information. Our system of law requires that a person not be harassed or unduly hit with subpoenas, but if there is enough evidence that a judge, and in this case Congress is the judge, needs to ask for the production of documents or testimony. Now, you can't be forced to give testimony against yourself, but people that are in your employ, people that are associated with you, or people heard you talk about your plans to do diabolical things. I mean, they are subject to it as a beat up. And our system of justice couldn't work unless some powers existed to get at information. So, so we could actually put under the high crimes down here, we could put refusal to just obey any subpoena at all, without reason, without any conceivable reason other than trying to cover up crimes. We have under high crimes here, violation of the emoluments clauses. I just touched on that, but there are lawsuits going on, but Congress shouldn't need to wait for those lawsuits, and we shouldn't need to wait for them. The man ought to have the decency to obey those subpoenas, because that evidence is almost certainly there, that he has violated these laws because people from the Saudi government had stayed and paid excessive rates at, say, at his hotels, and it seems almost certain that Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, has taken money from the Saudis. Violation of campaign finance laws. Well, that's a clear one. Clear. He's already been named as the co-conspirator, as Nixon was named as a co-conspirator by the grand jury, and he's been named in this circumventing of the campaign finance laws to cover up his affairs with Stormy Daniels and Kathy McDougal. I don't have it in my notes, sorry. I didn't get that many notes besides the slides. But this is a definite thing that's working through the Southern District of New York. And Mueller didn't even get into this. This is a whole other area of criminality where he has been named as a co-conspirator in the Michael Cohen case. Egregious lying to the public. Well, actually, lying to the public was cited as a crime Nixon did. I don't know if it's actually in one of the articles of impeachment, but this guy has done it on steroids. Lies. Do you have any idea how many lies he's told according to the New York Times? Moving along, he says. Witness intimidation, witness tampering. He's done that. I mean, definitely with the case of Manafort. He's intimidated witnesses. He does it like a mob boss does it. He doesn't do it absolutely directly, but sometimes there's a tweet which is, it can be very much interpreted as a witness tampering event. Okay, obstruction of justice, there we are, just discussed that. Conspiracy or acceptance of a foreign enemy power's help to subvert an election. This is a controversial one. Mueller did not actually find him capable of being charged beyond a reasonable doubt with this crime. Does anybody have an idea what beyond a reasonable doubt would be in a percentage? In general, what most people would think would be beyond a reasonable doubt guilty. How guilty?
Definitely guilty.
How guilty?
Pretty definitely guilty.
Like 90%, should we say?
Better than that, probably.
You think better than 90%?
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Reasonable doubt. We're not talking about any doubt at all. That the standard is not beyond a shadow of doubt. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. So from the evidence that Mueller collected, do you think he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of what would be called conspiracy with Russia?
Apparently not.
You don't believe it. I just am curious, I didn't mean to do this, but could we have a show of hands of people who think that he's guilty 50-50, beyond 50% guilty of conspiracy with Russia? Or conspiracy with his campaign workers who met with Russian aides and said they would be happy, they would love to. Oh, shoot. Well, that's right. We'll get that. We'll get it back. Oh my God, what's going on? No. It was just, oh shoot. It's nothing, don't worry about it. Okay, so better than 50-50. How many do we have?
It depends what you mean by conspiracy, one, and conspiracy to do what, second.
Well,
it takes logic
Yes.
and
which he
analytical
doesn't have.
thinking rather than emotion.
That's true.
Right.
So you put up nothing but emotion.
That's true.
Paintings, emotion.
I'm sorry, I have to disagree, because what comes out of the man's mouth WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks, love reading WikiLeaks. Russia, if you've got those 30,000 emails, please send them to us. And then standing there and saying, our intelligence is absolutely abominable, okay? The FBI, the CIA, what have you. And I have no reason to doubt that what Putin tells me isn't the truth, okay? That doesn't sound like he is focused on what is correct for America. Not to mention the fact, whether you want to put off his big mouth of WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks and what have you, here he is in the middle of a campaign soliciting anything that would do in his opponent, which is from a foreign entity. Okay, because
Right.
so don't forget that even WikiLeaks is run by an Australian, much to my shame. Sorry, that's not how it goes. And then to absolutely, put our own press who delivers factual information, either that came from his mouth and then he counted a week later, and the count on the lies or the misrepresentations goes up to probably heading to 9,000 at this point, okay? So that has nothing to do with emotion. Most of the stuff that we know about Trump came out of his own degenerate mouth, okay?
Yeah,
Period.
That's what's so amazing about it, and it's sometimes been called, committing crimes in plain sight. I didn't necessarily mean, I think it's more than 90% myself, which would be beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, maybe there's a disagreement in this room amongst the people, but it only really takes one. How many items of impeachment does it take, Pete, to be able to impeach a president?
How many votes?
How many articles of impeachment would it take?
Oh, you mean high crime?
Yeah, just one. Yeah, and with Nixon it was 3. He was about to get 3. He was about to get a 3 count when the House voted completely. Okay, well I gotta move on. It would be treason by a common standard. Not necessarily by the standard of our laws, but a lot of people do consider what Trump did to be treason. Now, I've added here something I haven't seen too often, contributing to medically avoidable deaths of people due to sabotaging the Affordable Care Act. And that is because by making it harder to get subsidies, by causing things like the time where you could apply and all of these things, all these nitpicking things, people had actually died. I don't have a number for you, but I think that if he is able to completely destroy it and throw all these people who are on Medicaid because of the Affordable Care Act, many, many more people will die. And that is basically politically causing people's deaths. That's murder, actually. So we could impeach and remove if the Congress were to do that. It's a big, heavy lift, and it probably will come about only if the people are in the streets demanding it. Now, there's another way to do it. It can be through the 25th Amendment. That is, of course, something that came along well after the Founding Fathers, but it was put in, and some people think it was by the necessity of doing something in case something happened, like almost happened to Kennedy, where he was shot, he stayed alive afterwards, and you had a president, however briefly, we saw this even today, that there was something about it in the museum, that he was alive for some time, he had a pulse, let's say. But if a president was incapacitated somehow, what would the country do? And so this has been invoked a couple of times. One time was when Reagan was shot by Hinckley, I believe, and another time was when I think one of the Bushes went in for surgery, and the Vice President briefly took over. But this would be to remove Trump by a vote of the Cabinet and the Vice President, which is Pence right now. They would have to, by a majority vote, declare him incapacitated. And they would remove him. It would go, after a period of time, the two houses of Congress would vote on it. It would only be a majority vote. So this would be, everyone has said, well, if you impeached Trump in the House, you would still have the problem of the Senate having to get 67 votes. This was what happened with Andrew Johnson when he was almost removed from office after being impeached, but it was by one vote, or there would have been a 2/3 to kick him out in the Senate. So it's come that close in the past. Like that was 1867, I think. Could have been 68. But here it doesn't seem possible. But again, with Nixon it didn't seem possible until the tapes came out. Now, this would be a way around it. One thing about it is that if you knew for a fact that you did have enough votes in the House and Senate to defeat, Trump could actually, after he was declared incapacitated, he could say, no, I'm not. I've got a doctor that'll claim that I can tell a giraffe from a tiger. Remember that time that Trump got a passing grade on his health from his doctor? That he was a medical doctor with the Navy. He was an admiral. It was crazy. He gave Trump an intelligence test, and one of the questions was, you could tell a giraffe. But Trump would, of course, come up with something like that where he had a doctor claim that he wasn't incapacitated mentally. And the House and Senate would have to affirm that, no, you're out. And so that would be one way to get rid of him, and that might be one thing to agitate for. The downsides to the removal, of course, is that if Pence took over, would he be a greater danger because of his wanting to make this a Christo-fascist country? Now, we may disagree about that, but Pence is the kind of guy who just goes along with everything that's far right in the Christian world. We could have a debate about whether that's even something, any Christian could possibly be far right since Jesus doesn't teach any of those things. But if we were discussing removing Trump, would Pence be a greater danger? And the worst case scenario would be that Pence could somehow get himself elected in 2020. And another great danger is that, Trump could get wind of what's happening and he could just, fire off some nuclear missiles. Yeah, I know. Well, dictators, remember Hitler, when he was defeated, he sent out an order to destroy everything in Germany, all the infrastructure. Am I right? Yep. Okay, well, what I want to do is tell you about that there have been mass movements that have removed heads of state, and they have caused changes in government, and it has been outside the regular elections. So, although this would be going, the last two things we mentioned, impeachment and 25th Amendment, those would be definitely within our Constitution, and indeed, the 25th Amendment has been used before, and the impeachment process has been used twice. But never, 3 times, I'm sorry, I didn't even mention it, three times, but anyway. Once it was successful, it was not a formal impeachment vote by the House, but it removed Nixon from office because he resigned. So anyway, the mass movements we saw in Iran in 79 to 80, we saw the Shah had to flee the country. This was certainly not a good outcome for the United States, but it did at least remove a dictator who had been put in place by the United States. So we're mentioning it here.
in Poland, there was a long battle of mass movements. The Solidarity movement was mainly labor-oriented. It did not result in actually the big change until '89. You had Aquino versus Ferdinand Marcos. He was a dictator in the Philippines. He was extremely corrupt, murdered people. He stole so much wealth from the country. And he was removed in mostly a peaceful movement of just people rallying in the streets. That's right.
Could you make that larger?
Yeah, you know what? You're right. I can make it larger. I can make that. Yeah. Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah, we think
By accident, I got
that in all cases here where people believe a dictator or oligarch could not stay in office without military power removing him, would not leave without being removed by force. All these cases showed political or legislative effort to recall or impeach. And so time and time again, there's precedent for removing a head of state who is guilty of abuses of power or high crimes. And it's been the last 20 years that these, 20 to 30 years that these have been in the news. So it doesn't always mean that armed force is required where there's popular support for removal.
Yeah, when somebody has become so, when a leader has become such a dictator or has violated the norms of society or they've committed extreme crimes, sometimes it takes the power of the people to remove them. Now, there was a large movement in 1989, and in East Germany people were fed up, and it kind of was almost by accident that the Berlin Wall was kind of bureaucratically, I mean, it was kind of in the air that it might happen, but when the Berlin Wall was said that, well, the government said, well, anybody can go back and forth, we'll do that. And then everybody in the public said, oh, wow, does this mean the Berlin Wall is down? And there wasn't any actual order by the government to say, yeah, you could tear the Berlin Wall down, but the guards just kind of went, oh, well, yeah, I guess it does mean that it's down. It was kind of a movement of the people. And in a lot of other countries there, they rose up then, and they toppled the governments of these Eastern European countries, which had been dominated by the Soviet Union. And Czechoslovakia was a remarkable one. That was the Spring Revolt or something, I don't remember exactly. It was something to do with spring, whatever. Václav Havel was a playwright. He became prime minister after the stooge for the Soviet Union were down. In Romania, they actually overthrew Ceausescu and they killed him. They were so mad at this guy because he was one of the worst dictators of all time. And he was not just run out of the country, he couldn't flee. They got him and they killed him. I don't remember if there was any trial at all. Do you remember? No. They were just done with that guy. And in Russia in 1991, I mean, the oligarchs there, they were communists. They called themselves communists. I mean, we can dispute whether they really were. But they were overthrown by a movement in the street. There were 3 deaths. There were 3 protesters that died. It was a very, almost entirely peaceful movement. And Yeltsin got on the tank, and the military wouldn't fire on the people. Everybody was wondering whether that would happen, which had happened in Tiananmen Square when the military was willing to fire on the people in China. And that's why we don't mention that one here. But there are many movements that fail because the military did side with the oligarchs, or the police put them down. The Egypt thing, the Arab Spring, also was Tunisia and several other countries where that occurred. But the big news was the fall of the dictator Mubarak, who had been propped up by the United States. And we have to, how can we got 5 minutes, but we'll have to run through this. We had South Korea. President Park Geun-hye was taken down by candlelight vigils. just candlelight vigils, really. This was a peaceful movement, bring her down. She had to resign for corruption. It wasn't even what we call high crimes, really. Algeria, just recently, that was this year, this president, I'm not even sure I can pronounce his name, Abdelaziz Bouteflika, after 20 years in power, he had to step down because of mass movements in the street. And there's a movement going on in Sudan. Now, the group that I'm with, this group, I wish I could flip it, but this group has, I wasn't able to bring my no button, I couldn't find it just now, but
I think it's on the next slide.
this group says 9 or no,
Yeah.
yes, in many different languages because this group refused fascism. The website's refusefascism.org. There are blue leaflets out there. I hope you all take one and read it. Very carefully consider whether you can just join a protest or two. You don't have to be any kind of a member or anything. There's no membership per se. I mean, it's interested people who are interested in ousting the Trump-Pence regime and calling them what they are, fascists. So, if you say no to fascists, and it's international too, because refuse fascism, one of our slogans is humanity first, not America first. Because what I like to look at that is that the United States needs the rest of the world. We need the environment to be good for the whole planet. We need friendships with other people. And particularly because we don't want terrorists and we don't want enemies. And so having the whole world and whole humanity as our first concern, I think is the most noble thing to do. Now, I'm gonna try to run through here. Refuse Fascism had called for this exact same thing of trying to get all the people in the streets on November 7th, the day after the 2018 elections. Because it's not enough to just have the Democrats flip one house in Congress. We see that the Democrats are dragging their feet for political reasons. They haven't moved ahead with a strict impeachment bill, a strict impeachment article. They're worried politically, but in the name of humanity, the Trump-Pence regime must go. And so in Chicago, many of us were there. The call to action, which is on that blue leaflet, which this is my summary. The fascist tendencies and goals of the Trump, Pence, and other extreme capitalist oligarchs. It's time for mobilization of large numbers of people to protest, demanding the removal of these enemies of our democratic norms and any hope of a socially just society. Well, that's my summary of what's in the blue leaflet. And we had people that were doing this on their own, these cute slogans. No one's free when others are oppressed. Let's make America smart again. We can make America gracious again, or graft averse again. It used to be we actually cared when politicians just accepted graft. Make America generous again. We had a more generous society, I remember, in the 70s. It was more generous under Eisenhower, for that matter. It was certainly, when you look back at John F. Kennedy, we just saw that stuff about Kennedy. We had the Peace Corps and all that. Oops. Or let's just worry about the environment and our future on planet Earth, this human species. Make America green already. MAGA. Make America green already. Okay. This is the creativity of the left. Love and peace on all that, on the police car. Treason is the reason why we're marching. To get out the poo president. Get rid of the poo president, what the top of that says. The earth is important. And so, at one environmental protest, they had a road to the earth. Save the earth, the only planet with chocolate. There's a little humor. We don't know, aliens might have chocolate. Refuse Fascism marches in defense of science, truth, and the environment. Boy, I ran over again, this is terrible. Science, not silence. This is my sign at the Science March. This was back in April of 2017. And for those of you that know math, this says that the Trump function over time, the integral is just in addition, a big set of adding up, infinitesimals. So from day 1 to day 93, which was that was the day of his administration. He was a negative huge factor at that point. The Trump function integrated over time. It was negative huge. Negative huge. And this was Trump, Donald Trump, is a weapon of math destruction. That was on the other side. A weapon of math destruction. And this kid had also had an equation about the NRA. I think she meant to actually have it multiplied by anyway.
You have a take question?
Yeah, well, fight ignorance, not immigrants. I've got a few minutes, don't I? Effigies can sometimes help. These are some puppets of Trump is a fascist. And this is one of the things I've done as an activist. This was not my idea, but it turns out everybody seemed to vote me into it, I guess. And I go around with a jumpsuit and Trump with a Trump mask. And in this case, it was right after he started kidnapping children and putting them in cages, which we didn't even put in our high crimes. I don't remember. Anyway, he was a kidnapper in chief. He still is. Other times I have up above there the criminal in chief. Other times it's something related to something in the news. But this was a march like about a couple miles. You weren't at that one, I think, but you were at the one in Hyde Park, where I almost had heat stroke because it was like 90 and humid, but I still got to the end of the march. I didn't do the whole march, but I snuck ahead. Well, I guess so. Power of the people is stronger than the people in power. I guess I ran out of time again. I did that the last time. But I want you to pick up the sheets. There's a sheet that has my lyrics, new lyrics to the national anthem called the Resistance Anthem. There's also a couple things that else I've done, which will be out on the internet soon. And so I hope that, could I just sing the first stanza of the Resistance Anthem? Okay. I hope I'll get this right. Let me just, I wanted to say, what would Jefferson do and what would Hamilton do? And I did have something planned about Hamilton, but okay, we'll just have you read the Federalist Papers, huh? And,
oh, say, can you see by the dastardly light those fascists in power, our country they're stealing? It's time for good people to face up to the fight and get into the streets with great masses teeming. The racism so bare, the scoundrels who don't care, give proof none can rest while the danger is there. Oh, say that the flag of resistance must wave as true patriots march our country to save.
Wait, whoa.
That was my idea. They sing at the beginning of the ball games, but it hasn't happened yet. Maybe you can make it happen. Get on resistanceanthem.com and learn those lyrics. Sing it at the ballpark. Okay, stay there and answer questions. I'm going to stay there and answer questions. You're right. This is the brutal part of the college of confidence.
Adam Schiff, along with most of the Democrats, or all of the Democrats, were screaming for Trump's impeachment, waiting for the Mueller report. And after the Mueller report came out, all of a sudden Adam Schiff is changing his tune. Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to impeach, and that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, Adam Schiff does want to impeach, but as a politician, he's not saying that outright. Nancy Pelosi probably will go along with impeachment when the rest of the caucus is ready to move forward with it. So politicians sometimes need a nudge by people. FDR said, I need you, the people, to nudge me to do more to fight the Depression. I mean, because FDR had many obstacles. Now, the Democrats now, I said in my talk that
They were worried about things. I talked to a congresswoman, there was a group of us, and went to her office for a friendly discussion, and afterwards I just got her and I said to her, it's the matter of the national honor. I mean, that the Democrats impeach Trump because of all the crimes he's committed. Because if he's allowed to get away with it, that will be a terrible precedent to set. I mean, I might have not used exactly those words, but I couched it in the terms of the national honor. And she did seem reluctant to go ahead, even though she is one of the most, excuse me, I didn't want to reveal who I was talking to. Oh, at any rate, she's one of the most liberal members of Congress. That's what I was speaking to. She kind of acted as if the Clinton thing was a bugaboo, that maybe these Democrats were speaking among themselves about, that there was a negative, they thought, to the Republicans for impeaching Clinton. And of course, impeaching Clinton was over nothing really anywhere near as drastic as what Trump has done. And I pointed out to her that the Republicans actually won, although it might have been through subterfuge. They won the election in 2000 with George W. Bush. So it didn't really hurt them, the impeachment that they did in late 1998. And the fact that Clinton survived in the trial, that it didn't really hurt them. But for some reason, a lot of Democrats are reluctant to go on the record because of blowback, the possibility that some of them are in swing districts, some of them, and it will take a lot more investigation. But the investigations will continue and there will be more evidence. And the Mueller report does actually make clear that Mueller expects Congress to go forward because Mueller couldn't actually indict the president due to Justice Department regulations, not laws. Let's have the next question.
I'm a conservative, and while Obama was president, he destroyed the country of Libya. He overthrew the democratically elected country of the Ukraine. He had troops on the Russian border. He put no bankers in jail, and he put more journalists in jail than any other president. And I had to live with this guy for 8 years. Okay. But you know, he got elected. So Trump got elected, and in 2020, everybody gets to vote again. And if your arguments are so strong, then he's going to lose in 2020, and our democratic process works. What I hear you saying is you're throwing away the democratic process because you don't trust the American people to make the right decision.
Okay, I couldn't write down everything you said, maybe you tried. But let's go after a few of these. Obama wasn't the greatest president ever, but when you compare him to Trump, he's so much better. It's almost unbelievable. But let's go beyond that, and let's say, yes, Trump got elected in an archaic and stupid system where the majority of votes didn't count. There were 3 million votes more for Hillary Clinton. Now let's go beyond that. Let's say that, okay, he was legitimately elected by the laws, even with the voter suppression and the gerrymandering and everything. I mean the major gerrymandering of having the states, the smaller states having these extra electoral votes. But let's go beyond that, and I was advocating a constitutional process, which has been used before, which is impeachment. And it has been used, it was used by the Republicans against Clinton. And it's true that Clinton survived a vote in the Senate, but he was investigated. He responded to subpoenas, he testified. This procedure of impeachment is what the founders intended. It is legal, it is expected to be done when a president goes beyond the norms, he goes beyond the bounds and commits crimes, and they could be political crimes even. It is not necessary that they be legal crimes. It is not necessary that he be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It is only necessary that the will of the people want him removed, because if the will of the people want him removed, the Congress will follow that. And that is what that's what Refuse Fascism, I'm not really speaking for the organization, I have been with them since probably the beginning, but I'm not an officer, and I don't agree with everything they say, but Refuse Fascism is looking for the Democrats to have a backbone and impeach the president, which is a constitutional process. And it is expected that it would, the founders, some of them expected it might happen once in a generation, that the president would have to be removed through this legal means. Now, going extra constitutional, yes, that is a stretch. I've been well aware of that. But when you have a president that is unstable mentally, when he's absolutely terrible as a moral person, kidnapping and taking children away from their parents, putting them in cages, and doesn't see the wrongness of that, you might have to go outside the Constitution. If you know how that would happen, I don't know. The original thought was that people who were rich and powerful might decide that they had to tell Trump that he had to step down. And we don't really look at that as a possibility that much anymore. So we're just saying, really, that the pressure has to be on, that this cannot be allowed to be normal, that we don't really throw our hopes that the Democrats will get this done and that enough Republicans will vote to remove the guy. And we're not even sure what would happen if Pence came in. But I truly feel that the national honor is at stake, that this process should move forward, and that people should be in the streets as they have been in these other countries. They did get rid of the president in South Korea not too long ago. And that was just because she was corrupt financially and for nepotism reasons. Well, actually, it was a friend of hers that was a very corrupt politician. It so enraged the people that they did actually get rid of her. Trump has done 100 times worse. Any other questions?
Oh, yes.
Sure.
Yeah, we know that 91% of Muslims are on Medicaid, and they take from the government, and it's very costly. And this is due to the open borders, these people that have come in. Are you still for open borders?
I'm not for open borders. I merely said that when people come seeking asylum, and when it's for reasons that they're fearing for their lives, and when it's from persecution or things like that, they deserve a hearing and they deserve to be treated with respect at ports of entry, certainly. Because
Are you aware that Obama did put
we're not
children?
talking about Muslims
Yeah.
anyway. All I spoke about was the immigrants trying to come across the border with Mexico.
Oh, but Obama did put children in cages. I don't think there was any outrage at that
Now,
time.
that is Fox News talking point.
That's fact.
Yeah, that is in fact, he
is
did.
a thing
He
that
was forced
happened
to,
when
right.
there were children that were thought to be not related to the grown-ups that they came with, and it was possible that they were being trafficked.
Same thing.
And so there was a very temporary detention of those children separated from the people that claimed to be their relatives.
Same thing Trump's doing.
That is not the same thing. Trump has taken children that were really these sons and daughters or brothers or sisters of people coming over the border, trying to come over the border, seeking asylum, and he separated them as a punishment. Obama was never doing that to punish people. That was a thing to try to prevent crimes from occurring. Okay, let's move on. Who's next?
Well, I'll ask one more question. Since the economy is doing so much better, what would the Democrats do that's different than bringing new companies back here and improving the economy, having a great stock market?
Well, it's interesting you mention that because one of the talks coming up at the college here, I just remembered that it's going to be about the future stock market crash. So we've amazingly had this ridiculous overvalued run recently, and many economists can't even believe it's happening. It's so crazy, but and many financial analysts see this as one of the most overvalued markets in history. And of course, the correction that occurred from October 1st or so to December 24th, that wasn't enough to shake any people out, really. It shook some people out, but it wasn't what you would call in capitalism an actual bear market. So I'm not expecting that this economy will continue. It usually follows after the crash. It usually follows the crash downwards. And it's not such a great economy when people are working 2 or 3 jobs to get by. And it's also not a great economy when wages aren't rising for regular people. I don't know how rich you are, ma'am, but unless you are, very rich, you didn't get much out of the tax cut, if anything at all. Many people are finding out that the so-called tax cut, which is a tax scam, has actually been a damper on the economy. So this is a complicated subject. Trump has gotten the benefit of the Obama boom. It's been continuing. The Obama boom, you can just look at the stock market when Obama took over, and it rose much more under Obama than it has under Trump.
Oh, you're an idiot.
No, you can just look at the figures. I don't have them with me, but we could look during the break. But the fact of the matter is, Trump is living on borrowed time.
So we could talk about that.
He's trying to get another one of these infusions of the money supply, the increase in the money supply, which economists say you can't do this continuously. And one thing about it is that he's increased the debt enormously. One of the problems with increasing debt is that you have to pay it back in future generations unless you do something like declare bankruptcy. Now, Trump is looking at that as a possibility. He's looking, and he even said that during the campaign, and you can look it up. He said that he regarded defaulting on the federal debt, not paying some of these bonds back that the Treasury issued. He looked at that as just another tactic. So when he starts defaulting on the national debt, man, you can ask me what I think of the Trump economy. Next question.
How do you propose, well, first off, I want to state that I don't believe impeachment should take place, only because it's going to never pass over at the Senate. If Mitch McConnell can deny a Supreme Court judge being a nominated individual, being even given the courtesy of an interview with the senators, he ain't going to open up the Senate for even a vote on impeachment, okay? And not only that, Republicans wouldn't dare move from the rabid mantra of you got to say you support Trump for the home base to vote you in again. But being that said, I still think that investigations should go forward, and we should absolutely get his tax returns, and the arrogance of him not releasing them is beyond the pale. If you have nothing to hide, then you should have nothing to fear. And I don't understand why it doesn't dawn on his supporters that we are entitled to know what the president's tax returns are all about, okay? Secondly, no matter what they uncover, even in the investigations, how do you propose that you present this information to a public of supporters for this man that has even tolerated him, referring to his base as, I love the undereducated, okay? So, I mean, he pretty much is convinced that they'll accept any piece of crap he puts in front of them. And I personally, want to be considered appropriately intelligent to appreciate what my president is trying to tell me, okay? And so how do you suggest that you overcome that, as well as this emotional mantra that they want to put on the Democrats, when it's more than nothing but a passion for the Constitution to be followed and to have a democratic society. So how do you even get that across?
Okay, usually we only have like about a minute for a question at the other place in the far, far north. I would say a lot of people are of two minds. about, yes, whether, it makes any sense to go through the full gravity to a impeachment article where we actually pass one, like they did with Clinton. Because, you're right, it is a wrenching situation and no one can predict the future, and if it causes his supporters to rally around him in some way or to do violence, who knows what they're capable of doing. I mean, he wanted to invoke the bikers,
The bikers will support me.
We don't know, and it's in some sense unpredictable. But as I pointed out to this congressperson, I think it's the national honor that we make clear the crimes of Trump. And even if it takes the Democrats till, and it's possible that they're looking at timing. And this would be a political choice, which is not a moral choice, but sometimes we just have to understand politicians might think of how the timing of inaction, even though it's the correct action, delaying it is better for them. And Pelosi might be making that consideration too. So Nancy Pelosi's pretty smart. She might, in my humble opinion, she might go ahead with the impeachment if she finds the time is right. But you might be right, that it's better just to do the investigations and drag them out until the election. But one way we can make sure that Trump at least has to try to make an answer to what is. And another thing is that these tax returns, in an impeachment inquiry, it might be more legally powerful to get the evidence of them in an impeachment inquiry rather than just how they're doing it.
Congress has the right to investigate.
Mueller
has passed it on to them to do that.
There's so much, and they're starting with, of course, the Mueller report and the incidents that are in there, although it wasn't as much as we thought. We thought that Mueller had the tax returns. That might not be true. I mean, everyone thought that, well, special counsel, he must have had the power to get those tax returns. But there's no evidence that he did. And Trump is just sitting on it because obviously, clearly they are guilty tax returns. There must be something there. But the Democrats have to make a decision. It's a trying time. We've had these in the past. The country has weathered them somehow. And I just hope that whatever choice they make, that it chastens Trump to some degree at least, that it reduces his power. I don't think that the actual impeachment of him, with articles that clearly show what his crimes are, and a trial in the Senate, which makes it clear that he's guilty, and then the Republicans vote to protect the guilty person, I don't think that will help the Republican Party or Trump. So he may act like it does. He may actually call for violent actions by his followers, which is very scary, and I'm terribly worried about it. But I don't think that we should do the dishonorable thing and put our heads in the sand and just say, well, he's just going to get away with everything. That's what I think. And you didn't say that either. You said we should just continue the investigations.
Yes,
and that is the least that we can do. And let's agree that we'll do that.
I agree.
For a good while, several months, 6 months, let's see what happens. And let's go back and revisit. Let's make our decisions based on what is good for the country and not what's good for any particular interest. But clearly, even though the Democrats are not as strong as I would like them to be, I mean, they're one of the best bets we have for something that will tip the scales into Trump either resigning or, I mean, one of the things that could happen is that somehow there'll be a deal that he'll get off. I mean, like the pardon for Nixon, although that happened after Nixon resigned, maybe there was a quid pro quo before. Maybe there'll have to be a deal that Trump will not be prosecuted and he'll resign. So a lot of things can happen. I mean, certain Democrats, if they have the evidence on them, I mean, maybe they can just say, well, if you go, then you won't have to go through the trial in the Senate. Like
But the impeachment of Nixon was done by honorable people on both sides of the Congress. This is not the case
If we can
anymore.
find a few Republicans, maybe we can do that.
It took Barry Goldwater to convince Nixon and a few other Republicans that went to his office.
Yeah.
So we don't know what will happen, but these are trying times. We just have to do the best we can with the cards we have. And one of the cards we have to play is large movements in the streets, if that's what it takes. If more evidence comes, right now people aren't motivated that way enough. We wish they would be, but perhaps something new will come out in the investigations that will motivate them to do a South Korea demonstration on that level. Anybody else want to weigh in?
I have the mic. I've had this for a while. Fascinating conversation all the same. I hear a lot of things here that I don't agree with, both from the left and the right that are together here in this room, which I think is great. I'm more an independent voter. I voted both Republican and Democrat for decades already. I vote for a person, not for a party, which I think is, my way of looking at things. Now, I thought we were going to hear from you something entirely different, so that's why I came, like how to deal with what's going on with our country. And then it has been more a protest against Trump, which, I personally don't, I'm not happy that he's in the White House myself, but that's okay. He was indeed elected, like the person behind me said earlier, which too bad he left, because I want to talk to him more after. Now, what I thought we were going to hear, and I was going to ask you, is you advocate protest and people in the streets and all that, which I think is fine, that, and all that. But also, I'm from a foreign country, like the lady who spoke earlier. This is the country supposed to be the leader of the free world that has the highest voter apathy in Western civilization and maybe of all time. So that, to me, is the biggest problem that we have here. This is not going to get people to the polls, what you're doing, very likely. Is there anything that you are doing that would help in a different way to see people to think clearly about what's going on in the White House, and if they don't agree with it, then they can vote the president out, which the person behind me said very correctly. Because I believe that with the way the voting system is set up now, and the way that people are voting, and the way a lot of people are not voting and should, nothing is going to change like this. So are you also doing something, quote, more, I don't know what the right word is, more, quote unquote, peacefully, or more in a different way to get voters of all people involved to look at it in a different way without protesting, just to go through the political system and figure out a way to vote the president out at the polls without, all that. So, or is it just a fascist movement, which is also fine? That's, part of the free world. You're allowed to do it. So, any other way you're looking at this? Thank you.
You mean anti-fascist movement? I'm sure you meant to say.
Not at all. I mean, just to get people to think about who their leaders are, maybe vote better next time if they feel so inclined.
Well, certainly, I'm very much in favor of people voting, but the election in 2020 is a long way away. And one of the slides said, can we wait that long? It's a long, long time.
Not very long at all.
No, I agree.
There are so many things that could happen. Trump could declare war on Venezuela. He doesn't have to have Congress. He can, just send troops in because he can say, well, they can stay there for whatever time it is that the War Powers Act countries. Let's have them stay. And
the Russians have sent troops already. The Russians have troops in Venezuela already.
Well, I don't know about that, but if they are there in advance of a possible United States invasion and they were invited by the government, that would be perfectly all right, wouldn't it? I mean, it's a sovereign country, and if they needed help to prepare for an invasion from a foreign power, it would be within their rights to do so. At any rate, I need to answer the question of the gentleman in the back. I worked for a Democratic candidate before the last election in 2018. I knocked on doors. I didn't know what more else I could do, but I'm trying in my own way to motivate people. Certainly it's mostly going to motivate people that are already anti-fascist rather than motivate people that are pro-fascist. So it's a little bit difficult for me to know how I can motivate those people that would be Trump supporters. A lot of people think that there's no point in trying to motivate Trump supporters. They've drunk some kind of a Kool-Aid concoction, and there's nothing more that can be done. But certainly, I urge every person who does have the ability to vote until it's taken away from them by the powers that be. And, you know, goodness knows we are lucky in this country to still have that right, most of us, but some of us it has been taken away, like felons in many states and people of color in many states.
You ready for a question?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, in the history of our country, I don't think the person running for office then spied on the opposition. What do you think about that, the open spying that's been going on?
What are you talking about?
The spying on of Obama to Trump.
Well, there's never been any evidence of that.
Oh, but there is. Actually,
There's never been any evidence of most of what you have said.
Fox News had. You watch Fox News a lot?
Actually, the new AG said there was spying going on.
This is insane.
By Obama.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he
Not by
did.
Obama.
Yes, he did.
No, he didn't.
He did.
What he was referring to was that
He was asked the question
by
and he
law,
said there was.
there's things called FISA courts by law, and in order to protect this nation, if there's a suspicion of foreign activity, which is spying, foreign activity which is to subvert our Constitution, to subvert
Well,
our
that's true.
democracy.
Obama was aware
Then
that the Russians were
there
interfering, but he never
There was an
gave that
investigation
information.
that the FBI started. Yes, the FBI started an investigation. Now, that's not illegal surveillance. That's an attempt at getting at the facts of what was possible criminal activity, in which in the Mueller report is reported as being criminal activity, but that criminal activity that Mueller decided not to charge the president with because he couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And we went through that. That might mean that it was 50-50 that it was criminal, or it might mean it was 95% that it was criminal.
Actually, Obama
Mueller
was
thought that he
aware of
couldn't
it.
get that extra 5%.
It's not a crime until it's beyond a reasonable doubt. Thank God we have that in this country.
It is a crime if it's committed, and the fact that you can't prove it in court doesn't mean
Innocent
that it didn't
until
take
proven
place.
guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Period.
Right. But that doesn't mean Congress can't remove a person if the preponderance of evidence is that they committed a crime. That's
But
only-
you've called,
that's only in a
you've
court of
named all
law.
these crimes that have never been determined to be crimes beyond a reasonable doubt.
And Mueller.
It's all emotional BS.
That's right.
All the paintings are emotional BS. They're to brainwash people into seeing pictures and thinking, oh God, my God, I gotta do this.
You think if Mueller didn't have evidence, he wouldn't have put it in the report?
It's like the crap
Well, he
stuck
did
in
put it
the
in the report.
TV.
There was
Some
no
is
evidence of
redacted
collusion.
and we don't know about it.
There's zero
About
evidence of collusion.
15% is
And zero
redacted.
evidence of-
Zero.
Zero.
It's not zero.
Yes, it
When you
is.
have 10 counts of obstruction of justice, and he said he couldn't indict him because of the
couldn't
Justice
prove it.
Department ruling in a memo that was written back in the Nixon administration. And the memo's purpose was to say that the president is so busy that having to deal with an indictment was not something the Justice Department would want to do. It was just an opinion of one lawyer in the Justice Department. And back in something around 1974. It was probably 1974.
Well,
And, that ruling, Mueller considered himself bound by, or he would have possibly indicted the president for at least one of those obstruction of justice charges. The fact that he
Speculation.
didn't means that he just was giving the evidence to Congress to continue.
If he could have
As
done, he
this
would.
lady was saying. that
Well, there was a choice
Congress can
between-
continue the investigation.
Right, there was a
All right,
choice, and Hillary has been actually found out to be lying in very many instances. So what would possibly make you think she would be a better president?
Everything that's happened over the last 2.5 years, just,
It's irrelevant.
Take a look.
It's an irrelevant question.
it is an
because he's
irrelevant
not the
question,
president.
but to what we're dealing with. We're dealing with Trump.
Because of all the
We're dealing
crap
with
that came out during that time. And oh, by the way,
I did ask
And the
you.
Mueller, but you keep on making these accusations and coming up with data that has no basis in it. You start out with the 91% of Muslims are on Medicaid, okay? Where are the government statistics to back up that
Exactly.
comment?
Where are the facts?
Okay, where are the facts? And you say that,
Yeah, I didn't even respond to that because it was so ridiculous.
I mean, but it's ridiculous. The one thing that needs to be focused on in the Mueller report is that he could not exonerate him, period. That's where your reasonable doubt comes into play, and he handed it over to Congress to continue on if they chose to do so. Okay? Period.
That's the situation. Of course, I'm way out of line to say that he's guilty of any crime at all, aren't I? Because
Yes,
that's
you are.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you guys basically went after Clinton with an impeachment, and you would have removed him from office. And for what was really a personal matter, because he was considered to be making misleading statements in a deposition. That was really all he was accused of. And it wasn't a case where he was accused of having sex with a page or an intern. And she was a consenting adult.
I'll take it back.
And so you guys were perfectly willing to, you know, on really a technical charge, remove a president from office for something so minor as that. And you're willing to let Trump get away with enormous amounts of corruption, with appointing people to appoint places in the cabinet who are incredibly unqualified, for basically taking bribes, people coming to his Mar-a-Lago for $200,000 to have access to the president. I mean, it's just an out-and-out bribery. It's out-and-out bribery. High crimes and bribery. They're in the Constitution. I mean, come on, get real. I mean,
Yeah, get some proof. Get real.
but the proof is, the proof
Get
is
some
that
facts.
everything is going on.
What, he didn't double his membership to Mar-a-Lago when he won the presidency? Is that not the truth? Okay, has anyone ever seen the journal transfers that he pledged to make into the Treasury based on any profits that he made in his Washington hotel or any other properties, okay, that from foreign entities?
Yeah, he's supposed to give up all his records.
Has anyone seen those journal transfers?
He has the
Because they
mic back
don't
here,
exist.
stand back here.
I mean, it's seriously, folks.
You haven't got the microphone
Your turn,
down.
sir.
Oh, it's crazy.
Your turn.
Should we get to a rebuttal soon, or?
No, I'm back on the.
Many of you are actually doing rebuttals instead of just.
No, I'm just back on my question. I don't think you answered all the way. Are you doing anything else beyond just protesting and
Well,
indeed
I-
all the
I
emotional
worked
stuff?
for-
No, I'm not finished with my question, sir. Are you doing anything beyond that? Because what you show here is fine, and I think that's allowed, and that's fantastic, because you should, you know, make your feelings felt, and I think that's great. But there is another way to do that, because this is a, you know, federal republic and all that, and it's not the same as some of those other countries that you mentioned. Where this other thing may have worked. This is, you know, a country with 50 different states. It's like 50 different countries in a way. So they're different. You need to do things a little differently here. So are you doing something about educating people in a different way to get them to the polls again? That was my question. And I believe you said no, but I just want to make sure you
I
heard
didn't
me.
say no. I've been presenting some creative things here that are, and people have insulted me and said, well, I'm trying to play on people's emotions, or I'm just using emotions
Damn right.
myself. So
Yeah, that's not the insult.
by trying to
It's not the insult.
by trying to do something different, I guess I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. You guys think? But,
Well, be truthful and you won't be damned.
Well, the truth is, Trump has committed crimes. They haven't
You don't know
They
that.
haven't yet been proven, quote, in a court of law.
That's just his
beyond
opinion,
doubt,
so that's okay.
They
Hillary
can't-
Clinton
they can
committed
be
a lot of crimes. She needs to
They
be
can
prosecuted. Don't you agree?
She was guilty of some negligence, according to the FBI director.
You
and
don't agree.
He actually didn't really have.
Never mind.
He was violating Justice Department policy. If you would know if you looked at the news, he was violating Justice department policy by giving that long press release with the information you just told me. That shouldn't have been public, that shouldn't have been made public. He went around the rules. But Mueller didn't. But I guess we're probably close to rebuttal, and this could go on forever. It's really great to have inspired this discussion. And I thank you all for being here. And I hope you will consider some of the things I've said and some of the art and musical lyrics I've said.
Okay, now it's your turn to talk, so who wants to be first? You got 5 minutes to respond to the speaker said for or against.
All right, I'm glad we can have a discussion, even if it does get a little emotional at times. But the subject of the talk was how we can save our democracy, and basically all we heard was an anti-Trump diatribe, which I don't think is very helpful. I agree with our questioner at the back that, why don't we do something to help people, have an educated vote, understand what you're doing. A justice system has to work on the concept of proof. If you can't prove that somebody has committed a crime, you have to let them go. Okay? Innocent until proven guilty, although we have lots of evidence that our system doesn't work that way. But Mueller had 18 angry Democrats on his team. He had 2.5 years to find any kind of crime. I mean, it was supposed to be limited to a certain subset of crimes specific to Trump, but he went all over the place. He spent $35 million, and he couldn't find hard evidence of a crime. If you don't think 18 angry Democrats over 2.5 years, hundreds of witnesses and subpoenas, can't find a crime, then there isn't one.
So, yeah.
I don't expect or want any clapping. This country was founded by some people who were more brilliant than I would say most anyone I know today. Even the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers that were written back then, they were written in language that most graduates from high school today could not read and understand. These people were more educated. Our educational system has gone straight to hell in this country. You dumb people down, they're easy to control emotionally. The first time I came to one of these meetings, I walked out of there with my mouth open, wondering, what the hell have I been around? I had never been in such a strong left-wing liberal consciousness. And it has been very important to me to understand how people think. When I was a little kid, I always used to ask, why, Daddy? I built the first radio-controlled model airplane in our town in Florida when I was, 10 years old or so. Constantly, I wanted to know the truth. I majored in physics in college. I went to law school and practiced law for about 8.5 years. Critical, analytical analysis is absolutely necessary for this country to survive. And that means taking all of your emotions and pushing them aside and accepting the arguments of other people for your analysis without emotionally just throwing them out and not listening to them. Everything I've heard tonight is pure emotion. All of these paintings are emotion. They are to stimulate, like some of the subliminals, and I don't know if you know about subliminals on TV. I was nearly asleep one time watching a very nice, moral, family-type program, and I was half asleep and half awake, and I saw a one-frame subliminal. And I woke up out of that because it was pure, unadulterated sex right in that family film. That's what people are doing to this public. Yuri Bezmenov, as I've stated before, made it clear that the first step in converting a nation to communism is to tear down the moral fiber. And that's being done constantly. You look out at Hollywood and it is gone. It is filth. I haven't even been to a movie for a long time because I don't respect them anymore. In my short term in practicing law, it became very, very clear to me that we are so unique in this world because we have our Constitution that set up a democratic republic, not a democracy. A democracy, it just leads to lynch mobs.
Right.
If the majority controls in every instance, then it's lynch mobs. And that is why our founding fathers, who were smarter than everybody in this room, I think, knew that we needed an electoral college to bridge that emotional gap that will happen in society when groups get too emotionally charged on something because they're believing all the crap they keep hearing in the news media or wherever else from someone who's got a strong opinion that they want to get across. We need to stop all of this emotional BS and get more logical, listen to the other guy. We need to get back to a Congress that everybody can listen and share and come to an agreement that's somewhere in the middle. So everybody gets part of what they want. If one party wins everything, it's horrible. It's a dictatorship. I don't care which party it is. It's a dictatorship. It's not what our founding fathers set up for us. It is not based on the principle that all men are created equal. And I think we need to get back into our Constitution and follow those principles that we have. You know, who was it? The Tsar of Russia during our Civil War put his navy out in the Atlantic Ocean, and he told France and England, if you try to get your colonies back, you will be at war with Russia, because he appreciated what we were trying to do over here. Otto Bismarck, who founded modern Germany, who took all these warring tribes and allied them in a way they couldn't war anymore and brought Germany into a peaceful country. A brilliant politician. He made a statement, I don't know the exact wording, but it was similar to the experiment being carried out in the United States today. What are you doing?
But it's better. You can hear, I can hear you.
May hold the hope of humanity for freedom in the future. We do not want to alter our Constitution.
Amen.
We want to follow our Constitution. And if you don't like it, you need to examine yourself. Years ago, I left the country and went to Germany for a year for about 4 reasons. Number one, I wanted to look at the United States through all of their eyes. I knew I'd be in language schools with people from all over the world, because I knew that all I knew was what I had learned here in this country, in my environment, and for my family. And that's not good enough to understand what goes on in this world. And that was a great decision. Another reason that I went over there was that I wanted to try to understand how a country that can produce some of the finest of art, architecture, literature, science, and so forth, produced the bestiality of Nazism and Adolf Hitler. Well, we could do that here if we had circumstances like they had. That Treaty of Versailles was horrible. It set up and caused World War II. And I have been of the opinion for a long time now that if we had made the right decision in the First World War, we would have supported Germany rather than England and France, because Germany was the victim in all of that. And because of the hatred that came out of the end of the war, when France lost 10% of its population, half of, a whole generation of young men, the hatred from that created the Treaty of Versailles that cut Germany up. And that led to World War II. Anyway, a lot of history is not even the way that it's written in the history books. The winners write the history. And even some of our Christian history is not exactly the way it's been written. And I think you need to interpret things rather than read them literally in a lot of areas. But this thing about emotion, to me, is the biggest issue with this kind of a group. You have to have the discipline, and you have to have it in your mind to take all of your emotions on a subject and move them out of there, and not try to deal with emotions. Not throw in the F word and the S word like you see all over the internet today, which are emotional BS. But to speak logically and respectfully to the other person if you want to start a dialogue and get your point across, because you throw up all this stuff and you just close the doors in everybody else's mind. We need to do that. Another reason I went to Germany, there were 4 reasons. I wanted to look at all these different minds from these different countries and analyze how they think and what they feel about, how they look at the world. And not all of our opinions and our viewpoints are the best. They may be better for us in some ways, some of them, but some of those guys have some pretty darn good viewpoints as well, and it works for them. We shouldn't try to dictate everything that we think to other people. Now, you mentioned Venezuela. There are Russian troops on an island in Venezuela where their constitution does not say foreign troops cannot be, but their constitution says foreign troops cannot be on the mainland of Venezuela. And the president of Venezuela has told the Russians you may keep the troops there, but not in Russia, and Russia is respecting that. So that's kind of interesting. Russia has, from what I have read, 2 military bases outside of Russia, very close to Russia. We've got some 600 or so. I've heard over 1,000. We've got them all over the world. We're the most dictatorial military power in history. And when it comes to drug trade and all of that, the biggest drug trader in the world is the CIA. They have paid for more crime than you can imagine because they made more money out of the drug trade. And the Defense Intelligence Agency is like that with them in that drug trade. I knew a man who flew Air Force cargo planes, and he flew down to South America one time, and they loaded up drugs, flew it back to a U.S. air base, and he kept his mouth shut to stay alive. That's the United States government. I had another friend who was in the Navy in Mobile during the Vietnam War, and these caskets came in, and one of them they were unloading, they dropped it, the lid came off, didn't have a body in it, it was full of heroin. That was the big reason for the Vietnam War in the first place, is the CIA control of heroin. We need to wake up to these bigger issues and not go into all of these little emotional BS issues. We need to realize that if you jump to an emotional cause on something and you want to act on that, then you should have been here 150 years ago so you could say, get a rope. And every one of those lynchings was a first-degree premeditated murder. Every single one of them. No matter how guilty the person was, if they were not taken to a court of law and given a fair trial with their peers, and 12 jurors find them beyond a reasonable doubt guilty of murder, turn loose. I know a lady today who is on death row in Texas, and she was framed by the police of her city. I have a friend who's trying to get her out. Anyway, I'm being told I've talked too long.
Can we rebut the gentleman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
You bet.
Can you stay there and I can,
come on
can you
up
stay
there.
there and I
No,
want
no,
to
you have to come
No,
up.
you
Come on up
got to
there.
come up to
You have to go up
make your
there.
speech.
Okay, because I want
This is a
to.
rebuttal period, this is not question and answers anymore. Otherwise, I think it never
You
ends.
are responsible to expose yourself to the audience.
Okay, so here's the person in the back. I'm in the front now. So I enjoyed what the gentleman said, and I believe that is a nice bridge between what this gentleman was saying and you in motion, because I believe that what you describe as someone who thinks logically, right, and which I think is great. So I'm from a country that borders Germany. I know the Germans fairly well. I've worked with some of them and all that. So,
Which country?
Netherlands.
Okay.
So, in case people were wondering about my accent. So, you described, and that was interesting because what you described, the forefathers, how they wanted their country to be. But he was talking about Trump, and a lot of things that you were saying, things that, when we are in trouble, like when somebody starts acting like this and this, do you think that what you were warning against is the way Trump may be acting at times? Because you were warning against, dictatorship and things like blah, blah. And I believe that the gentleman is here because he feels like Trump may be acting in a way that would be, oligarchic, dictatorial, and things like that, because that's the way he perceives himself to be, or that's why he likes all these, that's why he has conferences with Putin and the North Korean guy and all that, because he recognizes maybe himself in them. And I'm not saying that that's true or not, but since you're going from that angle, the logical angle, and he is going from the emotional angle, at least that's what you described, which is great. I was thinking about when you were talking, said, yes, the way you're talking, that is exactly what Trump is not. Completely, even though, I was just looking at it, objectively, try to. So that is what probably part of the danger that the gentleman here was describing, that Trump is possibly the most out there president, possibly, in the way you're describing we would not want our leaders in general to be, from the logical angle. So to me that was interesting, and I was going to ask that from the back, but I'm glad I'm asking from here. So would that in your mind, of taking the emotional out of it and just looks like what Trump is doing, or and his cohort, would that seem to be that we are somewhat in danger of going in the dictatorial area? So that was my rebuttal. Since you were so eloquent in describing, the fall of the Constitution, could it be that the gentleman is so emotional about it, which is fine, that he feels like Trump is not at all doing that? So that was my question to you.
And you want an answer to that?
Yes.
I don't think that Trump is taking steps like that. When you look at Pelosi and Schumer and what they have been
No, I was
doing.
just talking Trump.
I know, but when you look at Pelosi and Schumer and the interrelationship with them and what they have been doing.
Yeah, but that's not my question. My question is just what you were saying, hooking in on that and comparing it to what the gentleman was saying, just to lay some kind of, bond between what the both of you are saying. Pelosi, Schumer, I don't care about at this moment because.
Well, you're asking what's motivating Trump, right?
Well, to me.
Why is he doing what he's doing?
I'll tell you what I think. He just wants to make money. He just became a president. That's cool. I can get my I can get my name out there, and he just uses this as a publicity hound.
That's a speculation. Do you know of any other president in history who has refused to take a salary?
I don't even know if that's. I don't care
If
about
you want his money, you can take the salary.
What does that do with my point?
Well, you said he's there for money.
Yes, he's there for money because he wants to build more towers once he gets off. Once he gets out of the presidency,
You know this. You've talked to him and
That's
told
what
him.
it seems like to me.
Okay, seems like to me is just more emotional speculation.
That's right.
No, it's just an opinion.
Yeah, that's all.
And your opinion, you just told us your opinion as well, and that's okay. You just told us your opinion, and I'm telling you mine.
But I'm not telling you what I think they're thinking.
I think you were, because you were explaining how you need to take the emotions out, but still use analytical and all that.
That is absolutely right.
That is thinking. That is using your brain. We hope.
Well,
okay.
Using emotion is not thinking.
Thank you.
Here we go.
It's okay, man.
Oh, I have a following? Okay, first off, there's no discussion to ever be had when you accuse the other side's opinions of being emotional. Okay, that is automatically discounting anything that comes out of their mouth. Okay, and does not, again, open for a proper dialogue and analysis of bookings. Okay, now I would like someone to please tell me what "Make America Great Again" actually means to them. Because I've been here since the 70s. I certainly was the recipient of many great things that affected my life in this country. But, when I hear of what people's opinions are of what is communism and dictatorship and what have you, and I look back, someone equated lynchings to dictatorships. Hey, we've already done lynchings. We did them en masse. We did them in fact, they, would occur today if people had, the ability to do it with impunity, as they did in our own history in the past. Okay? Now, is that part of making America great again? Should we be able to go down to the town square, pick up any African American and just lynch him for the sake of it and have everyone come down in their Sunday best to watch, kiddies in tow? Is that making America great again? Because obviously any benefits that came out or were intended to come out of civil rights legislation that would have obviously not allowed for lynchings, okay, is in the process of being turned around. Okay, it doesn't matter, you know, what African Americans, you know, have potentially gained up until this point. When there's legislation that impacts their voting rights, you consider that making America great again. Okay, when you have legislation that permits any kind of discrimination against any particular group in society, okay, basically homosexuality, gay people, marriage, the whole 9 yards, or a woman's right to decide what to do with her body, does that make America great again? Because I'm really tired of hearing everyone come up with this moral indignation that is in back of those kinds of legislative, you know, legislation. That,
What
is
legislation
based
are
on,
you referring to?
Yeah, let's be specific.
well, every state has its form of the voting rights business. Every state has in some way tried to...
Yeah, but you're acting like there's some kind of new proposed legislation that's going to bring back black people being lynched and all of this.
No,
This
I'm
is
just
crazy.
asking,
It's crazy. What are
it's
you
got nothing
talking about?
to, again, I'm asking you the question, what's supposed to make America great again? Because the history this country has is not that laudable in many, many ways. Yet, you know, it's come forward. We have a constitution, which is an amazing document. But if we're not truly going to follow, you know, the tenets of the 14th Amendment, we're lost anyhow, okay? If we're not going to truly separate, you know, religion and government, it's going to cause us problems, which is also the basis of all of this. You know, and we absolutely go at Muslim countries and accuse them of being theocracies, to which they are, okay? And we can see how those people live and the domination of such. But there are right-wingers in this country, I think, that would be very happy if this was a theocracy based on Christian values, okay? And that's why the Constitution is an incredible document, because the forefathers saw bringing religion, you know, into government is a non-starter because of everything that it had done heretofore in history, okay? And the gentleman from the Netherlands, I'm assuming you weren't born during World War II, you were born after World War II?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm
Okay.
glad to announce.
But your parents,
My parents were
Would
almost
you-
killed in World War II.
yes,
Also.
and they went through it, and the Netherlands, and I've lived in Germany and visited all European countries. The point is, though, that with all the talk about the Treaty of Versailles, it wasn't a fair deal. It was meant to be punitive, okay? However, okay, it was the oligarchs out of Germany that prepped for the next war. They were the ones that backed Hitler, okay? And I don't understand, with everything that's happened in this history of this country, and all the laws that we put in place to protect oligarchies or even, you know, kleptocracies from coming to full bear in this country, and we seem to be overlooking the fact that we are, you know, living in, what's the word I'm looking for now? An oligopoly, sorry,
which has done away, oligopoly, thank you. Oligopoly, you know, which has basically shed all protection of the people from being dominated by the few. And we've all lived through this. And no one seems to think that that's something that we shouldn't be concerned about. It is amazing to me that to permit that, and to permit also any president, whether it be the current or former, I mean, obviously there's graft in government. We need to clean that up, okay? There's no if, buts, and whens about it. It'll never be a perfect job, okay? But to have a president that is self-serving on many levels, you know, making his own money, yes, but is making money out of his presidency at great taxpayer expense, because we fly him all around to his golf resorts, okay? If Obama had done just one or two of the things that Trump has done, he would have been tarred and feathered and shipped off to Guantanamo.
Are you serious?
I am being very serious.
His wife
Okay.
spent more airfare money than any
what?
president ever.
That's rubbish.
That is not rubbish.
That is not
That's
rubbish.
false news, sweetie.
That is
Okay?
not rubbish.
Then go do your fact finding.
You do it.
Okay, so I've been following this and politics in general ever since Nixon.
On CNN.
Okay? And not on CNN, I don't even have cable. Is that a surprise to you? Okay? I believe Walter Cronkite as being a genuine journalist, and many others, okay? And there are true journalistic pursuits. And for any president to stand there and indicate that the media is all fake news is utter, to me, that is absolutely treasonous, because it does violate our First Amendment, okay? And I don't know what this investigation will come to show at the end of the road here, but there's been enough horrid activities on the part of this administration and before. And I don't know, I've never heard of a campaign handing over polling data to a foreign entity for our own elections. Okay, I've never seen in writing someone saying, oh gosh, yes, I'd love to see that negative information from a foreign entity, okay? So please, these are things that came out of these people's mouths or in these people's handwriting. So I don't know where this is all going to end, but I really would like to know what motivates a Trump supporter to understand what they think "Make America Great Again" means. Because we're not living it.
Very easy to understand why we need to make America great again, because let's see, Obama doubled the debt. He fired more commanders than any other president. Fired them, just fire these commanders because he didn't like them, didn't like what they did. He weakened the Air Force, everything, all the military, weakened it. It was very, very weak. That's one major thing that Trump has done to strengthen us. We are not weak anymore. Obama weakened us in so many ways. His wife was on a spending spree, going on vacation, actually taking her friends, a series of friends with her, that the taxpayer had to pay, and stayed in these extremely expensive places. I mean, really and truly, just outrageous spending. If you look at the debt they've come up with, the Obamas, it's absolutely amazing. And when have you ever seen a president that doesn't even take a salary for what he's doing? He's not making money, he's losing money because he's spending all his time. Trump is spending all his time trying to help us and get some of the swamp out of Washington. All these people go up there, they do trading, they know insider trading, they all become wealthy. And the Democrats right now are much more wealthy than the Republicans, so that's a total myth. that the Republicans are only for the wealthy. That's been a good talking point for the Democrats for years.
But you didn't answer a question.
I didn't have a question.
Oh, no, I thought you said, well,
No.
make America great again.
Go up
Okay.
there to answer.
Okay. I thought you were going to tell us why Trump supporters think that
Why
make America great, what that means to
America great
them.
again.
That's what I thought you were going up there for.
I guess I'm the
Tom
last
has the
one
floor.
standing.
But you were just talking.
Tom has the floor.
I guess I'm the last one standing now. I want to thank our
So did
speakers
W.
for
Bush. He
a
did
great
way more.
job here tonight. You got us all thinking of something. I'm inclined to agree with what they had to say. You may disagree with that, but I especially like what she had to say. I thought it was on target. I'm just telling you.
I appreciate it.
And the one thing that struck me is that the Mueller report, for what it's worth, said he did not dishonor. He did not do honor to. I forget how it was put. There was
Not exonerated.
not exonerated. And so on that basis, he gave it to the Congress. And he pointed out all the different things that he feels that Trump did. And he could not prosecute him because of what the rules are in the Justice Department. So he left it up to the Congress to do something. Now, if you remember, Trump, when the Mueller report first came out, he had the write-up from our Attorney General that 5 pages that Trump did well and that there was no problems and he was exonerated. And so Trump was running around with this great thing of how Mueller was a great guy and he did everything proper and so on, and he was off the hook. But later on, he realized he's on the hook, and now he's mad at Mueller. So it's history, and it's there, and it's something to remember. But I'm forgetting what I wanted to say. Anyway, the real problem is that we understand that it's up to Congress to make an investigation. Now, the point of this hearing here today, I think, is that if Congress does not live up to their responsibility and make some sort of investigation, then we'll end up with a returned president who doesn't qualify to be a president, and we'll be in deeper trouble than we're in now. And we'll set a bad precedent for others in the future. And if you look back in history, Trump it's on record that his favorite book, which was probably the only book he really read, was Mein Kampf when he was years previous. That's from his first wife who said that, and then he had the bedstand in his room. He did. And well, no, I know it's the only book, but it's the one he read profusely was Mein Kampf. And some of the things he's done fit the description of that, just for your information. For example, making deals with other countries over free trade and trading separately for different months. That was the German philosophy at one time, only to trade with those countries where they had a balance, they had a favorable balance of return on their investments. So we're $72 trillion in debt right now, and we're in big trouble in that sense. And if it continues to get worse, we'll be like Weimar Germany. We'll be running around bushel baskets full of money because people won't go for our money. We've got to do something about that debt. We've got to reduce it. But if Democrats get elected, what will happen is that the opposition is going to beat them up on the fact that they have this huge debt, and any programs they want will spend more money and create more debt. So this is part of the problem, and this is why a lot of people aren't interested in voting, because they don't see a return on their time and they don't see their scope is not there. I want to just point out one thing. Since the Industrial Revolution, machines replace people, machines don't pay taxes. People pay taxes. And this is France went to a shorter workday, but they don't have the economy we have, and they can't sustain it. We need to do the same thing. We went to an 8-hour day in 1938, and reduced the work week from 60 to 40 hours, the work day from 10 to 8 hours. That took us through World War II and took us beyond, because women got in the workforce. As a result, we ended up with an employment problem instead of an unemployment problem, and productivity solved the employment problem. That's what has to happen again. And that would do a lot for our economy, in my opinion, anyway. But I gotta give this back to our speakers. They get the last word, and I gotta thank them again for being here.
Say that a good reading of history will surprise us. Any events will shock us. And we've got 2 more years to play out the Trump story. Let's see what happens.
Okay. It's been a long night. I was warned that people would get tired, but you guys didn't get tired. You're ready to go. At the end of our college complexes at Chicago, people are ready to clear out, and the cleaning crew is coming in to shove us out anyway. So, I just love to talk. As you can tell, I just ran over each slide. I was told, keep it down a little bit, move it along. But because I ramble, and that's me, and I am happy. I'm glad to get your alternate opinions. I appreciate coming down to the land of Texas here. Hook 'em horns, right? I like to do Ross Perot. Should I do little Ross Perot a little bit? Well, now you guys down here, you have really taught me a valuable lesson. You are world class now, in discussion-wise and intellectual ability and being able to be on top of the politics. You are just amazing, and I'm so glad to be here. Okay, so I think I learned a lot. I learned a lot from my host, Tom Berry here. I used to live on Berry Avenue, so this is an omen. Tom has become a great friend of mine here, showing me around the city and teaching me things. And one thing, I'm happy to hear from you, and from you in the back there, and even from you, sir. And even though I kept on thinking to myself, well, what standard of proof are we going with? Are we going with the standard of proof that O.J. was let go after the evidence was almost completely incontrovertible that he was guilty? And yes, our system of justice let him go. But are we willing to use that standard of proof with the President of the United States that has his hand on the nuclear codes and that can cause such great damage to our republic and democracy, and he's already done so. So what is the standard of proof? It is a genuine topic of discussion. And I realize that there are people that have opinions in both ways, on both sides. So I'm glad to have come here and gotten that feedback. Now, defending the Electoral College, though, the framers knew that our Constitution would have to be amended to new times, and so they provided an amendment process. And we may not be able to get rid of the Electoral College that way, but can't you just admit that it is a form of gerrymandering in which the smaller states have a larger representation in the Electoral College on a percentage basis, and this is mathematical certainty. And you said you had a degree in physics, so I assume you got some mathematical training. And it is unfair for those other smaller states, some of them which are southern, some which are western, but for the smaller states to have such a preponderance where they can overwhelm the vote of the people. And I think the founders, if they were alive today, they would agree that at this time we didn't need this buffer, which is what it was supposed to be. And I have to point out that the Electoral College, if it had behaved the way it was supposed to, as seen by the founders, they would have actually stopped Trump from becoming president. And a lot of us were looking forward to that might happen. We thought, oh, maybe Hamilton, Washington, those guys, they were onto something here, because the public voted for a renegade, they voted for a rogue person, and this was one of the dangers pointed out by Hamilton and the rest. And that the Electoral College might actually be a buffer between the votes of the people, and that they would, if they were persons making their own decisions on the basis of what was good for the country, they would have stopped a president at that point by voting for someone else. But they didn't do that. They didn't do that in December of 2000. 2016 to the great detriment of our society at this point. Now, to say that we should have supported Germany in World War I just can't go that far. I can see that maybe we shouldn't have got involved. Maybe it would have been better if we had been completely neutral, but Wilson had the idea that if we just were a neutral power, we wouldn't be able to weigh in on the side of democracy in the subsequent peace talks. But I can see the point that if we hadn't gone in Germany had won the war, then there wouldn't have been a Treaty of Versailles, and history would have been entirely. This is like a what-if scenario. There's a guy who wrote a book called What If. I thought that was really interesting to read the what ifs. What if South won the Civil War and things like that. Anyway, no real point. I guess I just thought there was an interesting comment here tonight. And the gentleman in the back from the Netherlands who challenged me to what more am I doing beyond trying to come up with creative one-offs or slogans or lyrics or trying to recover my cartooning ability and which I haven't been able to do, which is a shame. I didn't have any new cartoons to show you. But what am I really doing? We all should be challenged. I would challenge everyone in this room. What more can we all do? Some of you don't think that it's important to protect our democracy, or you don't agree that Trump and Pence and the Republicans that are defending them, even though they seem to be guilty of crimes and covering things up by any common sense. Not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I wonder if you really wanted OJ to go free, sir. Proof beyond a shadow of a doubt, or incontrovertible proof beyond any possible doubt before you admit something's happening, something's suspicious, something's wrong here, somebody's covering something up, their taxes are not released according to law, that the Congress requested those taxes and they should be forthcoming, and they are not being released because someone's covering something up. And this is just common sense that any human being can bring to the concept. Okay, so I guess I won't rant on, but I just had to respond to a few points, and that's all I can do.
Is the little statue of
Well, that's it for tonight. They kick us out here at 10:30.